There are few names in the world that carry as much prestige as Ferrari. For nearly a century, the Italian automaker built a reputation that most companies could only dream of. Ferrari wasn't just a car company. It was a symbol of speed, a symbol of luxury, a symbol of success, and most importantly, a symbol of exclusivity. People didn't simply buy Ferraris. They aspired to own them. They hung posters of them on bedroom walls. They watched them race across Formula One tracks. They dreamed about the day they might sit behind the wheel of one. But what if I told you that all of that disappeared? What if I told you that Ferrari threw away decades of brand loyalty, billions of dollars in value, and the trust of its most dedicated customers? And what if I told you it all started with a single decision? A decision that executives believed would secure Ferrari's future. Instead, it nearly destroyed the company. The name of that decision was Luce, a car that promised to lead Ferrari into a new era, a car that investors celebrated, a car that journalists praised, a car that customers pre-ordered in record numbers, and a car that ultimately became one of the biggest disasters in automotive history. But before we get to the Luce, we need to understand how Ferrari found itself standing at the edge of a cliff in the first place. Because the signs were there, the warnings were there, and another luxury car company had already shown exactly what could happen when a brand loses sight of its identity. That company was Jaguar, and Ferrari ignored the lesson. To understand why Luce failed, you first have to understand what Ferrari actually sold. Most people would say Ferrari sold cars, but that's not entirely true. Toyota sells cars, Honda sells cars, Ford sells cars. Ferrari sold something else. Ferrari sold emotion. Every detail of a Ferrari was designed to make people feel something. The roar of the engine, the shape of the body, the racing heritage, the limited production numbers. Even the process of buying one felt exclusive. Ferrari understood something many companies never learn. People don't always buy products. Sometimes they buy stories. And Ferrari had one of the greatest stories ever told. A story built over generations. A story of speed, victory, passion, and prestige. By the year 2032, that story was worth more than billions of dollars. It was priceless. Yet somehow, Ferrari's leadership began to believe that the story itself was holding them back. The company was still profitable. Its sports cars still sold out. Its waiting lists were still long. Customers were still willing to pay enormous premiums. From the outside, Ferrari looked unstoppable. But inside company headquarters, fear was growing. The automotive world was changing faster than ever before. Electric vehicles were becoming dominant. Artificial intelligence was transforming transportation. Autonomous driving systems were improving every year. Traditional car manufacturers were being challenged by technology companies. Investors constantly asked the same question. What is Ferrari's plan for the future? At first, executives answered with confidence. But eventually confidence turned into concern. Concern turned into anxiety. And anxiety turned into panic. The leadership team became obsessed with one terrifying possibility. What if Ferrari became irrelevant? What if younger generations no longer cared about sports cars? What if the future belonged to companies that could sell millions of vehicles rather than thousands? The more they discussed these questions, the more they convinced themselves that Ferrari needed a radical transformation. And that's where everything started to go wrong. Years earlier, Jaguar faced a similar challenge. The company wanted to reinvent itself. Executives believed the old brand image wasn't attracting enough new customers. The solution seemed obvious. Modernize, rebrand, reinvent, create something completely different. And for a while, the strategy generated enormous attention. News headlines appeared everywhere. Social media exploded with discussions. Industry analysts debated the company's future. But attention can be deceptive, because attention doesn't automatically create loyalty. Many longtime Jaguar supporters felt disconnected from the new direction. Some couldn't recognize the company anymore. Others wondered whether the executives understood why customers loved Jaguar in the first place. The situation became a cautionary tale taught in business schools around the world. Brands can evolve. They can modernize. They can adapt. But if they move too far away from their core identity, they risk destroying the very thing that made them valuable. Ferrari's executives studied Jaguar carefully. Presentations were created. Reports were analyzed. Consultants were hired. And somehow, despite seeing the risks, Ferrari reached a dangerous conclusion. They believed they could do what Jaguar couldn't. They believed they could completely transform Ferrari while keeping everything people loved about Ferrari. History would prove them wrong. The project began in secret. Only a small group of executives knew its true purpose. Officially, Loo-cheh was presented as Ferrari's first affordable luxury electric vehicle. Privately, it represented something much larger. The complete reinvention of Ferrari. The plan was ambitious. Instead of producing tens of thousands of vehicles each year, Ferrari would target hundreds of thousands. Instead of serving a niche market, Ferrari would compete for mainstream luxury customers. Instead of protecting exclusivity, Ferrari would pursue growth. Massive growth. Investors loved the idea. Consultants praised it. Financial analysts called it visionary. Spreadsheets projected enormous profits. The numbers looked incredible. But there was one problem. Spreadsheets cannot measure passion. And passion was about to become Ferrari's biggest casualty. For nearly 3 years, rumors surrounded Project Luce. Automotive journalists speculated endlessly. Investors demanded updates. Fans searched for leaked images. Everyone knew Ferrari was building something. Nobody knew exactly what it was. Then the day finally arrived. The launch event was held in Milan. The venue looked more like a technology conference than a traditional Ferrari unveiling. Massive digital screens surrounded the audience. Artificial intelligence demonstrations played on giant displays. Executives spoke about innovation, sustainability, and the future of mobility. The language felt different. The atmosphere felt different. Even the audience felt different. For decades, Ferrari launches focused on performance, horsepower, speed, engineering, racing heritage. This time, executives spent most of their presentation discussing software, connectivity, subscriptions, and autonomous driving. And then the curtains opened. The Loo-cheh appeared. At first, the crowd applauded. The car looked modern, elegant, futuristic, unlike anything Ferrari had ever built before. But within minutes, social media began filling with criticism. Some fans asked a simple question. Where is the Ferrari? The design was sleek, but it lacked the aggression people associated with the brand. The vehicle looked more like a technology company's first car than a Ferrari. Many enthusiasts felt something was missing. Not physically, emotionally. And that emotional disconnect would become the beginning of a much larger problem. At least temporarily. The media loved the story. Headlines described Ferrari as brave, visionary, forward-thinking. Some journalists called it the most important Ferrari ever made. Investors became even more excited. The company's stock surged. Financial experts predicted a new era of growth. Pre-orders arrived from around the world. Customers who had never considered buying a Ferrari suddenly joined waiting lists. Executives celebrated. Shareholders celebrated. Analysts celebrated. For a brief moment, Project Luce looked like a complete success. Inside Ferrari headquarters, confidence reached an all-time high. One executive reportedly described the launch as the beginning of Ferrari's second golden age. Unfortunately, reality was moving much slower than expectations. And reality was about to catch up. The first deliveries started 6 months later. Early customers were thrilled. Many posted videos online. Reviews initially seemed positive. Then the problems began. Small at first. A software update that failed to install properly. A navigation system that suddenly froze. A digital dashboard that occasionally restarted itself while driving. Minor inconveniences. Or at least that's what Ferrari believed. The company assured customers that fixes were coming. But the problems continued. Weeks turned into months. New complaints appeared every day. Battery performance didn't match advertised numbers. Autonomous driving systems behaved unpredictably. Connectivity features randomly disconnected. Owners became frustrated. What made matters worse was that Ferrari wasn't competing against traditional car manufacturers anymore. It was competing against technology-focused companies that had spent years refining software systems. Ferrari's engineers knew how to build incredible cars, but software was an entirely different battlefield. And Ferrari was losing. Modern brands live and die online. A single viral video can influence millions of people. A single negative review can damage years of marketing. At first, Ferrari dismissed online criticism. Executives believed unhappy customers represented a tiny minority. Then the videos started going viral. One owner documented months of software failures. Another posted footage of the vehicle refusing to start. A popular automotive creator released a 40-minute review titled, "The Ferrari That Forgot How to Be Ferrari." The video accumulated millions of views. The phrase spread rapidly. Soon, people everywhere were asking the same question. Had Ferrari forgotten what made Ferrari special? The criticism wasn't just about technology. It was about identity. People weren't disappointed because the Luce had problems. They were disappointed because they expected more from Ferrari. Much more. While the public focused on customer complaints, a much larger crisis was developing behind closed doors. Ferrari had invested enormous resources into Luce. Factories, battery facilities, software development teams, research laboratories, supply chains, marketing campaigns. The costs were staggering. To fund the project, Ferrari had quietly redirected resources away from traditional programs. Several supercar projects were delayed. Engineering talent was reassigned. Future performance vehicles were pushed further down the development schedule. At first, loyal customers remained patient. Then frustration began to grow. Collectors noticed fewer exciting releases. Dealers struggled to explain delays. Some longtime Ferrari buyers started looking elsewhere. What happened next shocked executives. Customers who had spent decades supporting Ferrari began leaving. Not because another company built better cars, because they no longer felt understood. Ferrari had spent years trying to attract new customers while accidentally alienating its most loyal ones. 3 years after launch, reality became impossible to ignore. Sales targets were missed, then missed again, then missed by even larger margins. Warehouses began filling with unsold inventory. Discounts appeared. Incentives appeared. Marketing campaigns became increasingly aggressive. But demand continued falling. Investors grew nervous. Quarterly earnings reports disappointed expectations. Analysts who once praised the project began questioning leadership. The same experts who had celebrated Luce now wondered whether Ferrari had fundamentally misunderstood its own brand. Inside board meetings, conversations became tense. Every presentation seemed to contain more bad news. Every forecast appeared worse than the previous one. The optimism that once surrounded Project Luce had disappeared. In its place stood uncertainty, fear, and blame. As losses increased, internal divisions emerged. One group argued that Ferrari should double down. They believed Luce could still succeed if given enough time. Another group wanted immediate changes. They argued the company needed to return to its roots before irreversible damage occurred. Meetings became heated. Executives openly challenged one another. Years of tension exploded into public view. Leaks reached journalists. Anonymous insiders spoke to reporters. Stories of chaos began appearing in newspapers and online publications. Customers watched from the sidelines. Investors watched nervously. Competitors watched with interest. And through it all, Ferrari's reputation continued to weaken. The final turning point arrived during a shareholder meeting. Executives presented updated projections. The room fell silent. The numbers were catastrophic. Losses had exceeded expectations. Future demand forecasts had collapsed. Recovery would require billions more in investment. For the first time, even Luce's strongest supporters realized the truth. The project could not be saved. A decision had to be made. Weeks later, Ferrari issued a statement. Production of the Luce would end. The announcement sent shockwaves through the automotive industry. A vehicle once described as the future of Ferrari was officially dead. But ending production didn't erase the damage. Trust had been lost. Customers had left. Investors had suffered. And Ferrari faced the difficult challenge of rebuilding its identity. In the years that followed, business schools studied the Luce disaster. Marketing experts analyzed it. Corporate strategists debated it. The central lesson remained remarkably simple. Brands are built over decades, sometimes centuries, but they can be damaged surprisingly quickly. Ferrari didn't fail because it embraced new technology. Technology was never the problem. The problem was forgetting why people loved Ferrari in the first place. Customers never demanded that Ferrari become another technology company. They wanted Ferrari to remain Ferrari, modernized, improved, evolved, but still Ferrari. That distinction changed everything. Today, a single Luce sits quietly inside Ferrari's museum. Not as a celebration, not as a triumph, but as a reminder. Visitors walk past it every day. Some stop and stare. Others barely notice it. Yet few objects tell a more important story. Because the Luce represents a lesson that extends far beyond cars. Every company eventually faces the temptation to chase trends, to abandon its identity in pursuit of growth, to become something completely different. Sometimes that gamble works. Sometimes it doesn't. But history repeatedly shows the same pattern. The strongest brands aren't always the ones that change the fastest. They're often the ones that understand exactly who they are and refuse to forget it. The Luce was supposed to be Ferrari's future. Instead, it became a warning written in billions of dollars, a warning written in lost trust, and a warning that every iconic company should remember. Because once a brand loses its soul, getting it back is far harder than anyone imagines. And by the time Ferrari realized that truth, it was already too late.